Welcome back. The results are in. Two density requests were turned down on Longboat Key, and there are some fresh faces heading into a runoff for some local commission races. Voters in Longboat Key are keeping incumbent Jack Daly on the town commission. Former Mayor Jim Brown is taking the at-large seat on the commission. And then in the city of Sarasota, voters chose to oust Commissioner Susan Chapman. Now 3 candidates will vie for 2 at-large seats. Former Planning Board member Jen Ahern Koch, attorney Hagan Brody, and business owner Martin Hyde. That runoff will be held in May. And Northport will have its own runoff for an open seat on the city commission. That race will be between Jill Luke and Pete Emmerich. And joining us for more on these results is Kevin Griffith, the vice chair of the Sarasota County Democratic Party. Matt Letelier, I need to ask him about the pronunciation on that, the executive director for the Republican Party of Sarasota, and Zach Murdoch, local government reporter for the Herald Tribune. Now, Matt, correct me on your...
Letler.
Letler. Okay, got it. So let's get started. Just overall takeaways. We'll kind of go down the line here and give some overall takeaways on the elections as far as turnout and just your general impressions.
Well, I think in the city of Sarasota, one thing that stood out was that 2 of the younger candidates won, and that was Jen Ahern Koch and Hagan Brody. Neither had ever held elective office before, but they apparently worked hard, and the voters wanted something different, and they went with the 2 younger voters, candidates.
Yeah, I agree with Kevin there. This was an election where incumbents were just kind of tossed out across the state. There are a lot of municipal elections across the state, and you obviously saw with Chapman getting ousted, which we're very happy about, that this was an election that was going to kick those incumbents out. And it's going to be interesting to see what happens in May when you have 3 brand new people coming up. You actually get into the issues. This isn't like, oh, this is what I care about with Jen or with Hagan or with Martin. That now we got to get into multiple issues, and you'll get to see a lot of meat that people can learn about these candidates.
Well, and the big takeaway for me from last night was that voter turnout, as you reported, was relatively low but kind of average for the city race, and that made for a really tight middle of the pack. Incumbent Susan Chapman was just 52 votes behind Martin Hyde for that 3rd place spot, and even behind her, former Mayor Fred Atkins was only 59 votes behind. It was very compressed in the middle there, which made for a really interesting evening.
I don't know if you thought the same thing, but I felt like we had a lot more attention on these races going into it. So I personally thought our turnout was going to be much higher because there were so many of these candidate forums and people came out for that, yet they didn't seem to come out to vote. Were you all surprised by that?
I'm not surprised by that because we just went through a presidential election. Every 4 years we go through a presidential election. No matter what, people are focused on that. And then 4 months later, you're asking people to return to the polls, return to caring about these city elections. I, for one, want to move these things to November, whether it's November of the same year, off-year election, or figure out a way to put it on to the midterms or the presidential. You'll get more people turning out. People will still care. There'll be undervotes, but you'll have more people turning out and caring about these elections because they're already going to go to the polls for president, for governor, for senate, what have you.
And Kevin, do you agree?
Well,
Would you want to
not
move
taking
them?
a position necessarily on the November or March, because I can take an argument on both sides. But one thing I'd say is kind of touching on what you just said, Haley. It seemed like with 8 candidates in the race and many forums, some of which had really high turnout. I know the Sarasota Underground had a huge turnout. We expected higher than average turnout, and actually we did. It was still low overall, but this turnout, this cycle was a bit higher, I think 1% or 2% higher than it was in 2013. So there was a little bit of a higher voter turnout.
19 is still very disappointing for an election like this. This is 6,000 people essentially deciding for a city that's second largest in the county. That's just upsetting.
But going back to the point with the forums is that this was the only issue they were able to focus on. And this isn't a presidential, then you have Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump sort of sucking the air out of everything. And you have Hagan Brody and Jen Ahern and Martin Hyde way down at the end. And actually the turnout or the results could be skewed by a presidential race.
And yet you'll have people in a presidential race who are showing up at the polls who, while they're waiting in lines, which I don't think there were any lines yesterday. I only did a couple polling sites. I don't think there were any lines. But they're going to sit in line and they're going to see what they're voting on. They can look at their phone as they're waiting in line to learn about candidates. And I think that the more people that participate in the process, the better.
Okay, when we come back, we're going to talk more about those. There were some moves to try to move these elections that failed, so we'll talk more about that. We're just getting started. We'll be breaking down more of these results right after we check on our chilly forecast. Welcome back. Sarasota County held its municipal elections yesterday. You can find the full results on our website, mysuncoast.com. But here to discuss those results and where we go from here is Kevin Griffith, Vice Chair of the Sarasota County Democratic Party, Matt Lettler, Executive Director for the Republican Party of Sarasota, and Zach Murdoch, local government reporter for the Herald Tribune. Gentlemen, thanks for being with us. We're going to start with Zach and tell us a little bit about that. We had just been discussing the possibility of moving the elections that was brought up for a vote in Sarasota.
Yeah, a little less than a year ago, we had what must have been about 2 months of discussions about that. Again, I mean, this is a repeat conversation, obviously. And the commission heard hours of testimony about this stuff. There was a Tiger Bay forum about it. It was kind of bandied about again for a few months until the commission ultimately decided they didn't want to move forward with that again and again and again, over and over. And the only way it's come up so far in the race is, Kevin mentioned the Sarasota Underground Forum, and they actually did a little cutesy red light, green light bit. And it turns out that the only candidates who didn't support the move were Jen Ahern-Koch and Susan Chapman, which means that Jen is the only candidate left in our runoff here that wouldn't support a move should that come up again. And I think there's a very real possibility it does when we get new commissioners on the board.
Okay, and we'll talk more about some of the other local races in a second, but I do want to, since you mentioned Susan Chapman, she's been a big name in the news. A lot of people unhappy with some of the things she said or some of the moves she's made. Thoughts on her not being elected?
Well, I can say this. Susan, I thought, touched her, the summary of her time in candidacy on the board with the mailer she sent out. It said she's got guts. And whether you agreed with her or disagreed with her, she stood her ground. And you know, sometimes that's in politics, it's for better or worse. But
because I'm sure some of her constituents liked some of the moves she made, while others did not. But
absolutely, and you know, you're gonna find that in any politician. But you know, Martin Hyde ran a campaign that was originally designed to get Susan Chapman out, and that was successful. This is a win for Martin Hyde and for many of the people in Sarasota, I think, that are celebrating that she is no longer going to be on the commission come May. Moving on to the runoff, I think that you're looking at a situation where people are deciding whether they want Sarasota to remain a city that is dependent upon a season that lasts, you know, 3-4 months, or if this is going to be a city that is vibrant all year round, a la St. Pete, a la Naples. And you're starting to see a move towards that. You mentioned that the two youngest people were elected. This is becoming a younger and younger town, and I think that bodes well. No matter the party, no matter the politics, that's better for the future of Sarasota.
But I'll tell you, people from Sarasota don't want to see themselves as St. Pete or Naples. I can tell you that.
right, we do hear complaints, you know, about us getting too large, too much development. But let's talk about the role of the parties. This is a nonpartisan election, but the parties do tend to pick a candidate. Some say that they support a certain candidate. Explain that situation.
Well, in this last cycle, the election that we just had in the city of Sarasota, for example, there were 5 registered Democrats. It's nonpartisan race, but there were 5 registered Democrats of the 8 who ran, or perhaps 6. The Democratic Party has its own internal rules that say whenever there's more than 2 candidates running for one position, they cannot endorse. So we did not participate in this election at all. And frankly, we're proud of, I think, how fair we were for our candidates. We did a good job, and I would say that the candidates would say we did as well, of being neutral in this. Now that we have 2 registered Democrats in a nonpartisan race moving forward, we will educate the voters of Sarasota who the Democrats are. That's basically the role. These candidates already have their own campaigns in place. They've ran for 3 months now, or 2 months. They have their own staffs. They've already sent their mail out. They know what they're doing without the party's involvement. But the party will play a role in educating voters in Sarasota who the Democrats are. And Haley, I think that will help boost turnout. And when we talked about turnout, when the parties do get involved, turnout tends to go up.
For the runoff.
Yeah.
And Matt, I know I saw frequently from some of the Republican Party locally was the statement that Martin Hyde is the only Republican running. That was kind of the
So
tagline.
we have the same rules, similar rules in regards to that, and we only had one Republican running in this race. So we got behind him, pushed him over the threshold to get to the third place, and we are going to be playing a role in the next 2 months. I agree that as the parties get involved, you're educating voters. That's all it is. Hey, this guy, Republicans, this guy is a Republican. Get off your rear end. Let's go to the polls. Let's vote for the Republican. Y'all are going to do the same for the Democrats, and we'll see how it turns out in a couple months. But there's certainly going to be some Republican play in the next couple months.
And Zach, your thoughts on that?
These gentlemen are being very polite about how this is going to play out because ultimately, heading to the runoff, knowing what these two guys just said, this adds a whole new dynamic to this race. We've seen this play out just as recently as late last summer. I mean, it's going to make it a whole new ball game to have these guys throwing in their own voices into a race that so far has been. It's been really loud and kind of chaotic because there have been 8 people. I think we're going to start to see it settle down, and the way they play a role is going to make a big difference in ultimately what happens May 9th.
Okay, so more to come on that, but we have to get to the long vote referendums. There was a big voter turnout for that,
Holy cow,
and they
yeah.
were voted down handedly. So your thoughts on that?
Well, I don't think it's any surprise. We've heard from Longboat Key for a long, long time about density issues. I mean, the colony was soundly defeated. I want to say that vote was like 88% against.
13.
Yes,
Yeah,
right.
I mean, it was very, very one-sided, and frankly, that's no surprise. I don't think anyone on Longboat Key would have thought otherwise, and they've made a big point of even bringing that argument here to Sarasota that density and changes happening in Sarasota are having a huge effect on the Barrier Island, like the Longboat Key weighing in on the Fruitville Road Diet Plan, for example.
Right,
So.
right. Okay, any thoughts on those referendums?
No, Haley, but one thing we haven't talked about is Northport.
Right.
And, just taking a step back, if you look at Sarasota County overall last night, although they're nonpartisan races, the Republican Party didn't have a very good night because if you look down in Northport, the 2 candidates that advanced were the 2 who were not Republicans. And if you look in the city of Sarasota, the 2 of the 3 who advanced were Democrats. So overall, as a Democratic Party, we're happy with the results from last night.
And Matt, your thoughts on the Northport results?
On the Northport, you have Joe Luke, who's non-party businesswoman, incredibly smart. She won. Gosh, I mean, she was high. I don't have the exact vote number in front of me, but she was handily ahead of Pete Emmerich. So we're happy to see that. We're happy to see someone who's a small business person get involved in these races. Martin. Going back to Sarasota and why we're involved is because Martin is a Republican. He's been involved with the party for a while, and we know this person and we're ready to get them to run. In the years to come, you're going to see the Republican Party in Sarasota get more involved in these municipal races. They haven't in the past. Frankly, the Democrats, this is the municipal are their Hacksaw Ridge. This is their last stand in this county that has gone red and redder and redder and redder these past several campaign cycles.
Okay, I'm going to have to stop you there.
Absolutely.
We do have a few minutes when we come back, and we will take our final thoughts with our guests, plus what some of our viewers are saying about a funding fight in the state capitol when we return. Welcome back. Longboat Key has 2 new commissioners. They also voted down 2 density referendums. Runoff elections for commissioners in Sarasota and Northport are scheduled for May. So what can we expect to happen until then? Our guests join us for our final thoughts, and we'll start with Zach. What do you hope people out there watching take away from these elections? They have another chance to vote in May if they forgot to do so yesterday.
Forgot. Yes,
right,
that's
or,
very kind.
Okay,
They
being
need to,
kind.
yeah,
right.
they should turn out in May, absolutely, because like we've talked about, there was very low voter turnout, and I focus pretty much exclusively on the city elections Sarasota elections this spring. I mean, and going forward, I think what people need to pay attention to is how the candidates settle into some of the big issues we've talked about, and in very brief spurts with so many candidates previously in the field. We need to hear the candidates speak at length about development, about traffic, about combating homelessness, affordable housing. A lot of those issues that we've only briefly run through so far are going to start to kind of blossom.
And parking meters. I saw some signs regarding parking meters yesterday.
But what hasn't been mentioned is this $200 million deficit that Aaron Coach is not even talking about, that the city is facing. This is a $600 million or $400 million budget that the city has that 600,000 people are voting on. So the things I want to take away is focus on what the city has coming forward, who's going to tackle these issues, and who's just going to pass them down the road. Get out and vote. That is the most important thing across any of these issues. The Longboat Key, Northport, Sarasota, get out and vote. And I really hope that the runoff has a higher turnout than this general. I hope. I don't see it happening. But I think those are the important things that we need to focus on.
Haley, also, go vote. Especially if you're down south part of the county. If you live in Northport and you want a hospital in Northport, or you care about the Atlanta Braves issue, or you care about the Springs issue, go vote. That's your chance in May to have your voice be heard.
Sometimes we don't realize we're voting for, you're just thinking, oh, it's this person on the ballot, but that person will help decide those issues in the future.
Absolutely.
So as an informed voter, I think you would all say, go out and talk to these candidates.
Absolutely.
Talk to,
Plenty of
find out.
opportunities in the next 9 weeks.
Oh, yeah.
And they're the most accessible because they're local candidates. I mean, you can go to any forum and you can get their ear, and they're going to listen to you.
They'll give you their cell phone number, most likely.
Right. They want you to come out and vote, so they are there to answer your questions.
Absolutely.
Well, before we go, we do want to share what some of our viewers are saying about last night's topic, the funding fight between Florida's governor and House Speaker. Last week, the State House voted to eliminate funding for Enterprise Florida, the state's economic development agency, and strip funding from Visit Florida, our tourism marketing agency. Governor Scott is planning to travel the state to advocate for both organizations. Are they corporate welfare or job creators? Here's what some of you are saying. Doreen Starkey writes, corporate welfare. Put that money toward more police and reducing taxpayer money paid for schools. Chris Cole writes, tourism provides much needed jobs. It also provides economic development for our children's future. Visit Florida has always been a well-run organization, and to diminish its importance is simply wrong. And Roger Dresden writes, we don't need any more people here. Stay home and save some money. So what do you think about the results of yesterday's election? You can let us know by visiting our Facebook page, facebook.com/news@7. You can also watch tonight's discussion and past ones. They are available on Apple TV, Amazon Fire, and Roku. Thank you to our guests for being here tonight. Kevin Griffith is Vice Chair of the Sarasota County Democratic Party. Matt Lettler is Executive Director for the Republican Party of Sarasota. And Zach Murdoch covers local government for the Herald Tribune.